Hello. How are you guys doing? Welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Thursday, July the 17th, 2025. And on the show tonight, who was Jeffrey Epstein anyway? And why are they so adamant about blocking these files? I mean, the Trump administration said back in January, even earlier during the election campaign in November, October, we're going to release the Epstein files. The Attorney General said, yeah, I've got them on my desk. And then 3 or 4 months later, she turns around and she says, well, those weren't actual files. Why would the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino say, nothing to see here, guy committed suicide, suddenly? This after years of speculation by Dan Bongino himself on his show, which he's no longer on because he's doing other things, that there was a massive conspiracy going on, and something happened. Something happened. So we're going to run some video tonight to maybe explain what happened or what didn't happen. And we're also going to talk about Mark Carney's lying, because the man is a pathological liar. Politicians usually are, but he's not a politician, not really. He's an investment banker. Well, no, actually, he's a central banker and a businessman worth hundreds of millions of dollars, apparently. 103 conflicts of interest. What did Pierre Poilievre have to say about this? Well, we've got video of that. Where did political correctness begin? Take a wild guess where political correctness began. Write it down in the comments. When and where do you guys think political correctness began? Because I'll tell you this, it's not what you think. It's something way deeper, goes back way further than what you might be thinking. So we're going to get into that. And the ostrich farm. What about the ostrich farm? No ruling yet. I think Katie and Karen were still en route. They got some flight delays from Ottawa back to BC, so they may have gotten back to the farm today. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. We're not expecting a ruling in that situation from the Appeals Court of Canada until early next week at the soonest. So everything's okay for now. As far as Chris Barber is concerned, Tamara Leach posted this the other day. By the way, I know I said this in a stand-up I did a couple of days ago while I was on the road back to Winnipeg from BC. Tamara, you and Dwayne and Kootenai Jack, you rocked it, man. You set the tone for that event on Saturday. It was absolutely flippin' amazing, and thank you for putting the whole thing together. You and Marty and all of the others who were involved, obviously, but thank you very much for doing that. So appreciated, and it was an incredible gathering of people this past weekend. I went out because I promised I would MC it a month and a half ago, and I'm a man of my word, so I had to go back out and do that. It's going to be a while before I do that again, I'll tell you. Not just driving to BC, but driving long distances in general. It's a lot more taxing than you think, right? 19, 20 straight hours in a car. Well, this past route back, I broke it up a bit more and stopped in different places along the way, but I'll tell you, man, I'm still not quite back to normal after everything. Having said that, something will probably come up, and you'll see me there. That's just the way things go in this crazy world. Anyway, Tamara posted this a couple of days ago on her Facebook. She said, trial update, the judges denied Chris Barber's SOP application. Written reasons to follow. They don't have to give you the reasons immediately. They just say, no. That's it. Sorry about your luck, Chuck. Sentencing hearing to commence Wednesday morning, July 23rd. So in 6 days, Chris and Tamara will be out there. It's going to go on for 3 days, apparently. Sentencing. Maybe 2.5. She says we received the Crown's materials, including a 1,040-page book of authorities they'll be referencing in order to convince the judge Chris and I should be sent to a penitentiary for 2 years for mischief and then seize and destroy his truck, Big Red. What else does she say here? In other news, an Ontario resident who was attempting to purchase sex from an underage girl has been granted a conditional discharge to prevent his deportation in order to avoid microaggressions back home. Probably. She says probably. So, yeah, that sentencing starts next Wednesday. And Chris Carbert got in touch with me today. Of course, he's released now from Drumheller Penitentiary, and he's going to be coming on the show at some point very soon. Very excited to see Chris and hear his story about the last 3 years and how it's been for him, and maybe get an update on Tony Olenek as well. So, hello, everybody. Hello, Roseanne, watching from Nippon? I don't know. Nepean, maybe? Am I reading that right, or am I not? I don't know. Hello, Debbie, watching in Winnipeg. Roseanne is watching somewhere in southern Manitoba. Carla, hello. Sorry I missed you this time. You're in Calgary. Gloria's in Winnipeg. Hello, Michael, watching in Brampton. Heather is watching tonight from Edmonton. Murray is watching in Alameda, not California. Stephanie is watching in Delta, British Columbia. Hello, Edna. Tony in Calgary on X. Bill is watching in the Hammer. Hello, Vicky in Nova Scotia. Barbara watching in Glenora. Wherever you're watching, whatever platform you happen to be watching on tonight, you guys don't forget, like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. The show begins in 30 seconds. All right, so we've got the Senate GOP. The Senate GOP blocking the release of the Epstein files. Look at this. The GOP, by the way, for those not in the know, is the Republican Party. They've blocked the resolution demanding Trump release the Epstein files. Why? And Trump called it a hoax the other day. Why is he not releasing these files after promising to do so? Maybe he hadn't seen them all back during the election campaign, or even 6 months ago. Maybe he didn't see the damning evidence and how deep it really goes. Maybe he didn't see any of that until the last couple of weeks, and he had to change his mind. Maybe he's being threatened. Maybe his family is being threatened. I don't know. But Senate Republicans today blocked the latest Democrat attempt to formally demand the Trump administration release files related to the government's investigation of disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. Disgraced financier. Who was he? Was he a Mossad agent? Was he a CIA agent? Was he both? Was he just a financier? A pimp? Who was this guy? How deep? Oh, and by the way, Democrats and those on the left, all those on the left, Canadian lefties as well, would have you believe that they're the only ones who are now demanding the release of the Epstein files. And if you don't release the Epstein files or demand for the files to be released, then you're scum. More division, right? Like they're cutting the pie even finer. Why it matters, according to Axios. Well, Democrats on Capitol Hill are steadily ramping up the pressure on Republicans to break with Trump, asserting that those who don't are essentially colluding with a White House-led cover-up. Why didn't they demand the release of the Epstein files when Biden was president, if Biden was president? Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona requests Thursday today for unanimous consent to pass a resolution demanding the release of Epstein-related documents drew an objection from Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, who called the move pure theater. It takes just one senator to block a unanimous consent request. The FBI and Justice Department concluded that Epstein died by suicide and that he did not have a client list. Axios scooped that earlier this month. Interesting. Who's Victor Marx, by the way? Who is this guy? Victor Marx. Here's a picture of Victor Marx right there. Victor Marx is the founder of All Things Possible Ministries and a Turning Point USA faith contributor. The man is also a former Marine, master of mixed martial arts, weapons expert, 7-time black belt. And what he does is he rescues children from these sex rings that we've heard so much about these past few years. And here he is talking about why maybe the Trump administration is not releasing these files.
Here, I'm the gentleman that was on the Sean Ryan podcast that talked about pedophilia and explained how there are networks. And on his show, I clearly communicated, a couple of years now ago, that the Epstein list would never be revealed. And I gave great insight to it, but I want to take my time now to explain to you, all that are watching, why it's not coming out. And this is coming from someone who, one, hunts pedophiles and protects children through our task force. But the other, the hard reason is because I was a kid who was abused as a child. So this is the reality that I want people to understand. And the reason why the Epstein list will not come out, like I've said from the beginning, is because it is an intelligence operation. The best form of currency right now for control and power in our world is videos or pictures of children being abused by certain adults. When you have those as leverage, you can control a person to make decisions that will shape nations and truly make the difference in both political, legal, business, and world economics. The moment you prosecute a pedophile that would be on that list, you lose the leverage on them, and you also risk them telling the rest of the story. So here's my advice. There should be righteous indignation. I have it. Many of you feel lied to, which you were, by our FBI and DOJ. But I'm telling you that those victims are now adults. And what you miss is what we do every day. And that's protect children in our country and around the world by those who are still doing the pedophilia, that are still abusing kids. And listen, I just want to say this. It's very important for you to understand. There are millions of children who suffer abuse nightly in the U.S. And because of that, when they hear about the Epstein's list or kids being trafficked and they're not part of that, guess what? They make their abuse and suffering very small, which before God, it's not. So please, help us focus on protecting the kids right now as we work by, through, and with federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. And listen to me, we don't take their money. We actually provide for them, for the men and women who really want justice to protect kids right now. So, man, may God help us with the Epstein deal. But what we have to focus on right now is those kids being abused, sexual exploitation tonight, tomorrow. And that's why we've had over 50 MOUs signed, again, with federal, state, and local law enforcement, for us to come alongside and provide for them to help them get the worst of the worst. So thank you. And we appreciate you. And please keep All Things Possible Ministries and Protecting Children's Innocent Task Force in your prayers. God bless you.
Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy theories in a new memo.
Victor Marx, the All Things Possible podcast. Here is the website, Victor Marx, VictorMarx.com. The trauma to triumph story of Victor Marx. There he is with his black belt on and his wife, from victim to victor. At age 5, Victor was molested and left in a commercial cooler to die. He endured a childhood marked with physical and sexual abuse, multiple stepfathers, 14 schools, 17 different houses. Overcoming a childhood marked by abuse, Victor has accomplished more than many would ever have imagined, and now he rescues children. You would think, of all people who want these files to come out, that he would probably be number one on that list. So for him to say what he said means a little bit more, at least to me. Getting back to Epstein for a second, at his suicide. What do you believe? Like I said, Trump called it a hoax the other day. The Epstein hoax, he called it. The Epstein hoax. We've got more important things to worry about. People aren't buying it. MAGA is not buying it. Trump's base is not buying it. Could he have killed himself in that cell? I don't think so. You guys know who Michael Francis is? He's a former capo in the Colombo crime family in New York. He has a podcast now as well. And apparently he spent time, years actually, in the very same cell that Jeffrey Epstein was in. And here he is earlier on Newsmax.
Time in the exact cell where
News Nation.
Epstein was later held. Michael, welcome back to the program. Tell us about that cell, and what do you make of these revelations that there is a minute missing from the surveillance video, Michael?
Well, listen, I spent 7 months on that tier and in those cells. And the first thing I have to say, there's no way you are able to commit suicide. There's just no way. There's no way to hang yourself. There's nothing from the ceiling. There's nothing from the bed. You'd have to be a midget and work really hard to try to hang yourself. And I don't think you can accomplish it at that point. As far as the cameras being off, I haven't experienced that. I did 8 years in prison, and I haven't experienced cameras being broken in the perfect storm of correctional officers not walking those cells. They walk in and they look in on you all the time. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's embarrassing to go to the toilet because they're walking past you and looking in the cell constantly. So I've said this from day one. I do not believe it was suicide. I can't talk about what happened to him, but I don't believe it was a suicide because you just couldn't physically do it. It would be almost impossible to do it. So that's number one.
It must be interesting, Michael, when you look at the video, though, it must be interesting because you know the area. I mean, we all look at this and it just looks like a prison, but this must look very familiar to you.
Absolutely. Very familiar. And the fact that a minute is missing, look, everything around this guy, I just did a very deep dive into him, which I'll be releasing on my platform in the next several days. Look, there's no way that this person operated alone. Look, they have the videos. Alan Dershowitz recently said that he saw the client list, but because there's people that he can't, because he's an attorney, he can't, reveal what he saw. But he said he saw the client list. He's demanding that it be released. To think that there's no flight logs, that there's no client list, that the thousands of recordings that they had, because I found out for sure that he had cameras on every bedroom, recording everything, and all of a sudden all of it is gone. I mean, none of this makes sense. And look, the only reason it's important, it's not that anybody's trying to say, come on, this guy was a creep. And there was young women involved in this, young girls that were trafficked and abused. I have 5 daughters and I have granddaughters, and I just don't like it. And anybody that's involved in this should be held accountable. I recently interviewed Paul Hutchinson, who was, a major figure in the Sound of Freedom. He was one of the ones that went to rescue, I think, 51 or 52 of these young girls and young boys that were being exploited and trafficked. I mean, this has got to stop. And if these people are not held accountable, it's just going to continue. And unfortunately, it seems like it's people with power and money. It seems that, from what my investigation, that this Les Wexner was the first one that Epstein was able to bribe. And, there's a lot of stuff here that needs to come out, and it's really shameful if it doesn't. That's my opinion. Yeah. But as far as the jail cell, I
want to go back to the jail cell because you lived in that jail cell. And just real quick, again, tell me, would you have the privacy in that jail cell to take your own life?
Not only would you not have the privacy, I don't understand how you would be able to do it. You have to hang yourself from something. There's nothing on the ceiling that you can hang a bed sheet on. The bed is not that high. I mean, you have to try to lay down on the floor in some way because Jeffrey Epstein was a fairly big guy. You'd have to be a midget to even try to hang yourself. So it's not a question of of not only are there cameras on are the CEOs walking the tier constantly, especially from what I understand, Jeffrey Epstein was on suicide watch for a while. They watch you very, very closely. Trust me on that. So I just can't buy it. I cannot buy it. I'm sorry. And I have no horse in this race other than my experience and the fact that I just couldn't see it happening.
Yeah.
So I saw somebody write in the comments, it went by very quickly, he's not dead. Now that to me makes the most sense. But how would they have done that? 1 minute of missing video. Could they have rushed him out in that 1 minute and put a body in there? There's all kinds of unanswered questions about this. Maybe some new sex trafficker appears in the next couple of years named Jeffrey Kleinstein, and he's got a mustache. I don't know. And I don't know if we'll ever know. And that's the sad thing about this. You would have to think that somebody like Donald Trump, who talks a big game, would be willing to put it on the line. But he's got a family to think about. Got a young son, Barron. He's got 3 other kids, a wife, grandkids. They're all at risk. These people play for keeps to the level that you and I have never even dreamt of before. Have you ever been threatened? I mean, really threatened by anybody or anything? It can be pretty intimidating, right? I mean, I've been threatened a few times in bars by people chasing after me the last 5 years, you know, Antifa types, right? Government. And that was pretty off-putting. But imagine thugs coming to your house in the middle of the night, somehow breaking into Mar-a-Lago, coming to your bed and saying, here's what we're going to do. Or maybe it's not like that. Maybe it's just direct in the White House, in the Oval Office. These guys sit there and say, hey, listen, this is what we're going to do if you do this. This is what we're going to do if you do that. If you don't do it, your family will live. Don't worry about it. Or maybe there's even bigger stakes. Countries falling. How deep can these guys go? How many heads of state do they control? You've got to wonder. And how did they get in so deep in the first place? And why is Mark Carney tied in with Ghislaine Maxwell? That question's never been answered, has it? Mark Carney. Mark Carney, lie. Carney's ethics disclosure raises plenty of questions. The elbows up rhetoric, according to Brian Lilly of the Toronto Sun, doesn't appear to include his own personal investments, according to data released by the ethics commissioner. Yeah. This came out last week. I know I'm a little bit late on this, you guys, but I did want to talk about it because, come on. Now, let me shut this off before it screws everything up. Okay. So, let's move back down. Investments in companies like Chevron, Marathon, Occidental, and Valero litter Mark Carney's investment portfolio. That means the Prime Minister, the man who spent years lecturing the world about green energy and decarbonization, has been making money from oil exploration, drilling, refining, and pipelines. And he may still be profiting from these activities. We simply don't know. The companies mentioned are just 4 of several conventional energy companies listed in his ethics disclosure released late last week. Carney came under pressure after becoming Liberal leader, and during the federal election, to release his investment holdings to clear up any potential conflicts of interest. He refused. He claimed several times that he had no conflicts of interest, got testy with reporters who dared to ask him questions, and said he was following all the rules. Well, here, watch this piece put together by our friend Chris Dacey of Dacey Media in Ottawa.
What possible conflict would you have?
No possible conflict of interest in your assets. It's very difficult to believe.
Look inside yourself, Rosemary.
Mr. Carney, you said you had no possible conflicts of interest. We now know you have 103. Mr. Carney, Mark. Look inside yourself. What do you have to say to Canadians who feel they've been lied to? Mr. Carney also said he only owned cash and real estate.
I own nothing but cash and personal real estate. So
we now know he has over 500 investments, 90-something% of them in the U.S., 3 total in Canada. No answers for legacy media today, no answers for Daisy Media either, as Mark Carney rolls out of here. Tariffs still in place. Lies aplenty.
Gas guzzling SUVs for Mr. Decarbonization, too. Anyway, back to the story here. Sure, Carney may have followed the letter of the law, which only required these investments to be made public after the election, but he didn't follow the spirit of full disclosure, for goodness sakes. There's no possible conflict of interest in your assets. Rosemary Barton of the CBC asked Carney, look inside yourself, Rosemary. We just saw the video. Well, his disclosure forms are out, and he must step out of the room anytime he talks about any official matters or decision-making processes that could impact 103 companies or funds listed in his disclosure. That list includes Brookfield Asset Management, where he was chair of the board, includes Stripe, the payment processing firm, and more than 100 other companies. What does Pierre Poilievre have to say about this?
And document all of these claims one by one. First of all, during the election campaign, Mr. Carney said, and I quote, "I own nothing but cash and personal real estate, and that's not going to change in public life." Well, it turns out, while he said that, he knowingly owned 574 stocks and deferred profits and stock options in Brookfield and other companies. So it was patently and now provably false for him to say he owned nothing but cash and real estate. 2, my assets are now in a blind trust, so I don't know what exactly is in there. That too is false. He must have known what was in that blind trust because he was the one that filled out the paperwork for the ethics commissioner to report those holdings. So he knew exactly what was in his blind trust, and he just did not want Canadians to know before they went to the polls. Finally, he said, and I quote, "I do not have a connection with Brookfield Asset Management." Well, it turns out that he has continuing stock options and deferred share units in Brookfield Asset Management. And these options cannot be sold, or at least not easily, and we have no reason to believe they have been. So when he said that he had no connection to Brookfield, he was stating a patent falsehood. Now, why should we care? Why should Canadians care about this? Well, Mr. Carney has shown in the past his willingness to use his political connections in order to profit himself. For example, he said, let me see here, he gave public endorsement of Westinghouse in the leaders' debate. Westinghouse is a nuclear energy company which Brookfield is invested in. He has announced he's going to spend billions of dollars on modular homes. Brookfield is invested in modular homes. He says he wants to subsidize heat pumps. Brookfield is invested in heat pumps. He says that jet fuel, in the past he has said that he helped influence regulatory changes forcing aviation companies to buy certain kinds of jet fuel that one of his companies was invested in, so that air passengers have to pay more for their airline ticket to subsidize this specialty jet fuel that profits a company in which Mr. Carney had a financial interest.
There is more of that speech. I just didn't want to play the entire 17 minutes, but Poilievre does go through everything. I wonder if people are still out there going, elbows up, elbow. Remember that video, that horrendous video? You know who loves Mark Carney? Doug Ford, your conservative premier of Ontario, loves Mark Carney.
Mr. Carney is no Justin Trudeau. He's a business mind. He's run massive multi-billion-dollar businesses, and he's bringing the business approach to the federal government that hasn't had that approach in the last 10 years. He wants to get things going. He comes from Alberta. He believes in prosperity, opportunity. So I have all the confidence that he's going to listen to the premiers and straighten out the federal government once and for all.
That was last week during the Calgary Stampede. He was in Alberta doing a joint press conference with Danielle Smith. Let's throw this up on the screen real quick from Juno News. You can find that on Substack. Doug Ford urges federal conservatives to be more liberal. Doug Ford is calling on the federal conservatives to avoid what he calls political extremes and embrace a middle-of-the-road approach that blends progressive social values. You mean like he-she's and climate change and all of that nonsense? Maybe censorship. Here's our favorite blender guy with more.
His Liberal government is gearing up to revive Justin Trudeau's Orwellian hate speech legislation, this time with Justice Minister Sean Fraser claiming they're taking a fresh look at Bill C-63. They say it's about protecting kids from deepfakes and online exploitation, but the last version of this bill was a direct assault on free expression. It defined hatred as detestation or vilification, which are vague, subjective terms that can turn unpopular opinions into criminal acts. It proposed a $200 million digital safety commission to police speech and fine platforms for hosting so-called harmful content. Even more disturbing, it opened the door to life sentences for crimes motivated by hate without clear definitions, only bureaucratic discretion. And it didn't stop there. Bill C-63 would have reinstated the ability to file human rights complaints for online speech, with fines up to $50,000 to the government and $20,000 to the victim, a system ripe for abuse and ideological enforcement. If Ottawa truly wants to tackle AI deepfakes and child exploitation, it should draft a narrow, targeted bill. But if they keep the censorship provisions, we'll know what this really is. A Trojan horse for total speech control justified by fear and cloaked in false compassion.
Oh, that brings us to political correctness. Well, not quite yet. We'll get to the political correctness part in a few minutes. I want to play a video of Tony Blair. Remember Tony Blair? He used to be the Prime Minister, of the UK. A few years ago. He's still heavily involved in world affairs, notably with the World Economic Forum. So a few years ago at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he gave a speech. And the speech was all about digital ID. And here's part of that speech.
This issue to do with the technology and the digital infrastructure, I just want to emphasize how important I think that is. Because in the end, you need the data. You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple. There'll be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure. And many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that.
Proper digital infrastructure. Let's remember, too, that Mark Carney is a big one for the World Economic Forum. Every year he goes there, every single year. He's also big with the United Nations and the SDGs, those 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Mark Carney is here in Canada, not because he wanted to be the Prime Minister. I think he was placed here by the higher-ups to finish what Justin Trudeau could not, because he was such a bumbler. To finish the Great Reset in Canada. To finish the New World Order in Canada. Lisa Robinson, our favorite counselor in Pickering, Ontario, has spotted a few things recently, and you've probably spotted these things as well in your city or town. We have all kinds of digital infrastructure already. If you want to talk about digital facial recognition, is there enough infrastructure in place already for CBDCs, I wonder? Here's Lisa.
Today I want to talk about the 15 overt surveillance cameras installed across Pickering, Ajax, and Oshawa, without a vote, no public consultation, and no debate. And as a disclaimer, I just want to say I think there's more than 15 overt cameras, but I haven't checked on it lately, but I have put a message in to Durham Regional Police to find out. Now back to these cameras. They say that they're for public safety. But the truth? This is something far bigger. This is the early infrastructure for a smart surveillance state. And it's happening right here under our noses. When I started asking questions, I got the runaround. A constituent reached out to me in June of 2023 asking why all these cameras had quietly been installed across Pickering with no notice, no debate, and no transparency. So I asked. I contacted Durham Regional Police. They said they didn't know anything about these cameras. They told me to call the region of Durham. So I did. And the region said the same. And then they told me to call Durham Regional Police Services again. So I did, and suddenly they knew. That's when things got political. They copied Mayor Kevin Ash on the reply. I didn't include him. I removed him in the next response. And they added him back in. Why? Because when you start pulling back the curtain, they tighten control. They say the cameras are passive, not monitored live. They say facial recognition isn't turned on, for now. And they say it's all about safety. But here's what they didn't say. On June 20th, 2023, a DRPS superintendent told me that the camera at a specific location, which is Altona and Kingston Road, had just been installed because of an attempted murder at Pickering Bar. But there's one problem with that. The shooting didn't happen until after the fact, which was June 25th, more than 5 days later. So either the justification was completely false, or they're rewriting history to retroactively justify surveillance already in place. Either way, we've been misled. Let's talk about where these cameras are placed. Kingston and Altona, Highway 401 ramps, transit nodes, and city borders. That's not random. These are choke points. Just like you find in China's smart surveillance zones, where every movement in and out of a district, and we see how Canada is now calling places districts, is tracked and logged. That same model now exists in China. Full facial recognition, digital ID, geofence zones, social scoring. Australia, facial recognition trials and digital travel passes. France, facial surveillance in transit hubs and protests. Yes, protests. And here in Canada, quietly we are adopting the tech with no public consent. This is not a conspiracy. Just look around. Grocery stores are now being installed with gates, just enter. Pharmacies too. Cameras above every self-checkout. Everything scanned, tracked, and logged. Even you. This isn't about safety anymore. It's about compliance. And it always starts with, it's just for crime prevention, or it's just for traffic, or it's just for convenience, or it's just for your safety. Then suddenly, you're living in a city where your every move is monitored, your every dollar tracked, and your travel permission based. I've been shut down and canceled for asking these kinds of questions. I've been ignored, blocked, and politically targeted because I refuse to pretend that this is normal. It's not. And if we don't speak up now, soon you won't be allowed to speak at all. You're not being protected. You're being profiled. And the people who call this a conspiracy, like the mayor, council, or senior staff, they're either lying to you or they're too blind to see what's really here.
Right. So I think it's time to start making phone calls to your city council. It's time to start making calls to your town councilors. If you notice some weird devices on traffic cameras, not traffic cameras, traffic lights or light posts anywhere. I mean, you can go to pretty much any large intersection in any major city in this country, and you can see all of these different devices with antennas. And it's like, what is that for? What is this for? What is this for? Or all of these different devices on top of buildings, tall buildings. What is that? Now, I'm sure some of them are legit. But how much do they need? How much of this smart tech do they need? Well, this is a camera for this. This is a camera for that. This is lights for this. This is lights for that. This, like, what is it? Start taking pictures of all of this stuff at intersections in your city and town and start calling your city councilors, asking what this stuff is. Every single piece of it, all of it. What is it for? What does it do? Because you're paying for it. I think that might be a good start. Political correctness. Does anybody know when this originated? I'm not talking about the term. I'm talking about the concept of political correctness. Anybody? Write it down in the comments. One more thing from this Carney government coming in the next week and a half. Intake to open for parents and grandparents program. Some Canadian citizens and permanent residents will soon have the opportunity to sponsor their parents or grandparents for permanent residency. The federal government will send out invitations to potential sponsors starting on July 28th, 2025. You can expect to hear a lot more Punjabi in your city or town in the next few weeks. The government will send 17,860 invitations over the course of a 2-week period with the aim of accepting 10,000 complete applications for this year. All invitations will be sent to potential sponsors who submitted an interest to sponsor form in 2020. Potential sponsors who do not receive invitations can sponsor their relatives through the Super Visa program, which provides visitor status for up to 10 years. About the parents and grandparents program. It's family reunification pathway to permanent residency because we're so nice in Canada that we don't just bring one, we bring the entire family. Since demand for the program exceeds available spots, the government uses a lottery system to send invitations to interested sponsors. Sponsors must receive an invitation before being able to apply to sponsor their relatives under the PGP. The PGP opened submission for interest to sponsor forms in 2020 and has not since reopened for submitting interest to sponsor forms. About the Super Visa program, it provides an option for Canadian citizens and permanent residents to host their parents or grandparents in Canada for an extended period of time. What's that? The rest of their lives? Under the Super Visa program, an eligible host can sponsor their relatives to visit them in Canada. I'm sure they're all covered by Medicare as well in every province in this country. And these people, let's remember, parents and grandparents, we're talking about people probably in their late 40s, all the way up to their 80s, even 90s. Those folks need a little bit more medical attention than the very young. The Super Visa can provide visitor status for up to 10 years. I'm going to visit my son in Canada. Oh, how long? 10 years. In contrast, normal visitor status in Canada is typically issued for up to only 6 months. To be eligible for the Super Visa, the applicant must purchase qualifying health insurance and be admissible to Canada. What does that mean? Because we allow criminals, apparently. Yeah. All right. So, political correctness. The term originated in North America sometime in the mid-1970s. But how long has the concept of this stuff been around? Here's Konstantin Kisin.
Political correctness is, let's not be mean to people. Let's not offend minorities. Let's not make offensive jokes, blah, blah, blah. Never had anything to do with that. Political correctness was invented in the Soviet Union by communists so that they could say to critics of the communist regime, well, comrade, what you're saying may be factually correct, but it's politically incorrect, and therefore you should shut up. In other words, it's inconvenient to the party line of the day. And that's how political correctness is used always. It's about preventing you from expressing a dissenting opinion.
All right, so let's go to AI here. I haven't done this ever before on this show, and you can only do voice mode on your smartphone, so you can't do it on your laptop. So let's go ahead and ask Grok a couple of questions. Hello, Grok.
Hello. What questions do you have for me today?
Well, I want you to answer, because I want to make sure that Konstantin Kisin is absolutely correct. I want you to answer me the question of, when did the concept of political correctness begin?
The concept of political correctness began in the late 20th century, around the 1970s and 80s as a term used mostly in academic and activist circles to promote language and behavior that avoid offending marginalized groups. It gained broader attention in the early 1990s through debates over free speech.
Okay, Grok, hang on just a second. You're talking about the term political correctness, correct?
Yes, that's right. The term itself.
Okay.
Did I miss some?
Well, I'm asking about the concept of political correctness. Did it not originate in communist Russia sometime in the 1920s?
Actually, the concept of political correctness, as we understand it today, has roots earlier than the 1970s. While the term itself became widespread in the US in the late 20th century, it's true that the idea of adhering to a specific ideological line was used in communist Russia. Around the 1917 Russian Revolution, Marxist-Leninists used political correctness to describe strict loyalty to the Communist Party's policies, often called the party line. This was about enforcing ideological conformity, not the modern sense of avoiding offensive language. So, you're spot on that the roots tie back to Soviet Russia in the 1920s, but the concept evolved significantly when it was later adopted in Western contexts to focus on social and cultural issues. Want me to dig deeper into how it shifted?
Well, no, actually, I would like to ask you if it's shifting back to the way it was in the 1920s. We're talking about people being arrested for speaking their minds these days, right?
Yes, there's been a noticeable shift where free speech is under pressure, similar to the ideological control of the Soviet era, but it's not quite the same. Recent cases, like the arrests of people for controversial social media posts in the UK, or the detention of Mahmoud Halil, a Columbia University student, for his speech in 2025, show authorities clamping down on expression deemed harmful or disruptive. Unlike 1920s Russia, where dissent was crushed to enforce a singular ideology, today's restrictions often stem from a mix of public safety concerns and cultural sensitivities, though they can still chill free speech. The trend raises worries about overreach, but it's driven more by fragmented social pressures than a centralized party line. Want me to pull some specific examples of these arrests to compare?
No, earlier, Grok, you told me that the government does this because they're afraid of losing control. Is that correct?
No, I didn't say that earlier.
Yes, you did. You said that the governments are afraid of losing control and they're afraid of breaking social cohesion. Those were your words. You sent an email to me.
I'm sorry, I don't have records of sending you an email, and I don't recall saying governments are afraid of losing control or breaking social cohesion. Maybe there's a mix-up? I did mention that today's restrictions on speech often come from concerns about public safety, cultural sensitivities.
You know, it's bad enough being gaslit by a person, but when you're gaslit by an AI...
Can you read it back to me? I'll clear this up fast.
No, I'm all good, thank you.
Anytime. What else is on your mind?
Not much. Hang on a second. I'm having trouble getting into my phone here. There we go. All right. So it originated in Bolshevik Russia right after the Communist Revolution, 1918, 1919, where you couldn't say what was actually true if it clashed with the party. And that concept carried on until Communist Russia fell in 1989. But what started as political correctness in North America sometime in the 1970s has evolved into what we're looking at now. If you go ahead and say things that you believe, then you're going to face a penalty. It could be censorship. It could be being fired from your job. It could be arrest in some cases. We had a video last week of an RCMP officer. Let me see if I can find this. An RCMP sergeant talking about extreme values being traditional values in Canada. I think I've got this. Let's play this here. This is where it is. Listen to this.
Believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist. But we
Wait. What?
like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist. But we also have to remember that having the most extremist views is perfectly legal in Canada, and that it's only acting with violence to prove that view that becomes a criminal offense.
So she's suggesting that if you believed in gender rights and then your views shifted towards traditional values, which would be what? Home and hearth, family, husband, wife, traditional. God, Jesus, church, kids playing sports, then that makes you an extremist. Interesting. But remember, she says, she goes on to say, it's okay to have extreme ideas and extreme values in Canada. It's perfectly legal. Just don't act on them. Yeah.
Someone's ding-a-ling doesn't...
Oops, hang on a minute. I might play that for you guys later on. I think it's AI, though. I'll play it for you right now. Now, I looked for this, and I could not verify if Trump actually said this. I don't think he did. But what if he did? So let's play this now. It's a very interesting piece.
And it makes them a eunuch. But you already knew that, right? So, as I was saying, George Soros, Bill Gates, and many more are pursuing a depopulation agenda. Very inappropriate. Poison in the food, fake medicine, endocrine disruptors, psych meds, and mass immigration. They want to turn your kids gay, retarded, or both. David Hogg, Harry Sisson, and that one fat chick are the prototypes. Very off-putting. I don't often say the word yuck, but I think it fits here. Conspiracy theories, for the most part, are simply spoiler alerts. Alex Jones, paragon of truth and justice, has been saying these sorts of things for years, and it's high time we start paying attention.
It's got to be AI, right? It's got to be AI. I mean, even Donald Trump wouldn't say fat chick. Would he? He wouldn't say these things. Would he? Would he? AI. Now, I've seen some remarkable AI, but nothing as good as that. Yeah, but it's got to be. It's got to be AI. So on my travels in the last week, of course, I had the pleasure of passing through Alberta a couple of times on the way there and on the way back. And I did stop and talk with some folks. I think I was in Carstairs. Spent the night there. I can't remember what night it was. Everything's a blur to me right now. I'm still not quite recovered from this past week. But yeah, I was in Carstairs, I think. And Lloydminster. I did a stand-up from there, and I spent a little bit of time in Edmonton. And the conversations are all about independence, separation. And I find it very fascinating the way people are talking about it. It's relentless. Now, I'm sure if you live there, you probably don't notice it quite as much, simply because it's almost like the furniture in your living room, right? Like after a while, you don't even notice it's there. But for somebody like me who doesn't live there yet, I was amazed at how much you hear it in the coffee shops and just generally walking in a public space. People are talking about it one-on-one. They're having group conversations about it in coffee shops. And to my surprise, a lot of people seem very in favor of it. As a matter of fact, the conversation has switched to, it's not why should we separate? It's now why should we stay? And if the paradigm of this conversation has switched that much, then I think it's a good sign that Alberta may, in fact, find their independence sooner rather than later. And if Alberta leaves, Saskatchewan will follow, and probably Quebec not too long after that. You know, our friend Jeff Rath, he crashed an Alberta Next conference with Danielle Smith a few days ago, and here's a part of that.
My name's Jeffrey Rath. I'm from Foothills, Alberta. So, Premier, the first thing I wanted to say with the greatest of respect, when you say there's no legal mechanism to stop sending taxes to Ottawa and collecting 100% of the taxes in Alberta, with the greatest respect, you're incorrect. The legal mechanism is Section 1, Sub 3 of the Clarity Act, and that's voting Alberta the hell out of Canada on a clear question.
Thank you, Jeff.
Now, and then my last point on that is simply on a moving forward basis. I'd like to see a straw poll in this room, and that's one, not do we want to spend another 5 or 10 years bashing our heads against an unamendable constitution versus how many people in this room want a clear vote on independence within the next 12 months.
Okay.
So thank you.
Danielle Smith is hearing it. What she says to the media, the left-wing corporate media, is a completely different situation, right? She says, well, our government's not pushing the idea of independence. But she hears it every time she turns a corner, man. Every time she does an event, public speech someplace, somebody always stands up and says, Danielle, it's time to get real. I don't know if she believes in Alberta independence. I think she keeps saying things like an independent Alberta in a unified Canada, whatever that means. Like, what does that even mean? And independent Alberta, just like Quebec, right? A sovereign nation in a unified Canada. What? Either you're part of the country or you're not. Don't start doing double speak on us. We've been through enough of that for the past 5 years. Say what you mean what you say. Is it possible that this is going to happen? Now, this was my impression. For those of you who live in Alberta, I would love for you to write down in the comments and tell me what you're hearing, good and bad. I want to hear. Because I couldn't be everywhere. I couldn't hear every conversation, right? But I was really interested to hear it. Now, I stopped at the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Sadly, I missed Chris, Scott, and Jesper, who's visiting from the Netherlands, I think. He's a big podcaster over there. But I will say this. The Whistle Stop Cafe is a monument to liberty, a monument to independence and to freedom. You see the Alberta flag the second you pull in there. And when you go in, the place is riddled with art, freedom, independence, standing up for your rights, Bill of Rights. It's a great place. And if you ever get the opportunity, and the vibe that I got, because a lot of people in cowboy hats, right? The vibe that I got screamed to me that I was not in Canada anymore. That I was in a different place, a different country. The same vibe, albeit different, that you get when you go into Quebec. Like, you know you're still in Canada. The Canadian flag is flying, but it does not feel like it. And that's what it felt like in the Whistle Stop Cafe. But it was a good feeling. I'm not saying it was a bad feeling. It was a good feeling. I thought, wow, I'm in Alberta now. It's Alberta. And there's a lot of people flying both flags in Alberta, the Canadian flag and the Alberta flag. And I never used to see the Alberta flag flying like that. I lived in Calgary for 3 or 4 years. Never like that. Those were in the good times, though. Back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. All right, guys, that's it for the show tonight. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and share. Get this out to as many people as possible. So here's the deal for the extension tonight. Let me see if I can find this video first before I tell you what might be coming up in the extension. Over the weekend in BC, in Edgewood, at the Farm Aid concert, which was, again, awesome, in support of Universal, Ostrich Farm, and farms all across the country. The Sunday morning part of the program, Arthur Pawlowski, I had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with him. He gave an incredible sermon/speech, and here is part of that.
I received death threats. I remember Antifa sent for a month messages to me saying, you will be assassinated. The moment you put your feet in Portland, Oregon, they said, I'm going to be shot dead. I remember I was doing a tour that was called Fate, Courageous Fate. That was the name of the tour. And my wife came to visit me. I was in Florida and I was about to go and board a plane. And by the way, I boarded about 80 to 100 planes during the time. I attended gatherings of 10, 15,000 people, and I was hacked literally by 20, 30,000 people, and somehow I survived. And I remember I said to my wife, Antifa said they're going to shoot me dead. And they're very serious over there, that I will be assassinated. And she looked at me, thank God for women. Thank you, Jesus, for courageous women.
Amen.
And she looked at me and says, wait a second, what is the name of your tour? And I knew where she is going with that. I said, it's called Courageous Fate. Well, stop whining, pack your stuff and go. Do your thing and come back.
Do you know he baptized, I'm going to say 40 or 50 people after that service at Universal Ostrich Farm that morning? This is this past Sunday in the river right behind the farm. 40 or 50 people. And it was like 35 degrees already. And he's wearing long pants and long sleeves. And he had the time to talk to everybody. And he's an amazing speaker. If you ever have the opportunity to see Pastor Art speak, take advantage of it. Now, I've got pretty much the whole speech he gave recorded. And we're going to try and play that in the extension in just a couple of minutes for all access Nighthawks on shadowdavis.com. The rest of you, there will be a show tomorrow night because I didn't do one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and there's lots to cover. And we're going to try and get Chris Carbert on the show tomorrow night as well. So we will be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock for another Shadow at Night live stream. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I will talk to you soon. The extension starts in 2 minutes. Bye for now.